It was a clear morning in the quiet neighborhood of Willow Creek. Sunlight filtered through swaying trees, and the distant sound of birdsong provided a soft, gentle soundtrack to what should have been an ordinary day. But for one house at the end of the cul-de-sac, something far from ordinary was unfolding. A large white moving truck sat parked in front of the Roberts' family home. Its back was wide open, and inside were boxes stacked like a jigsaw puzzle, labeled with words like kitchen, toys, linens. Movers hurried back and forth from the front door to the truck, their boots thudding on the walkway, their hands full of the fragments of a family's life. Inside the house, it was chaotic. The rooms, once filled with color and warmth, now echoed with emptiness. Framed photos had been taken down, the shelves stood bare, and the carpet bore fresh impressions from where furniture used to rest. The scent of lavender cleaner hung heavy in the air, blending strangely with the faint aroma of something else, something distinctly canine. Rex, the family's loyal German shepherd, lay silently near the front door. His ears twitched at the yow noises, his sharp amber eyes followed each movement. He didn't bark or whimper, he just watched, waiting. Rex had been with the Roberts family since he was a puppy. 8 years of memories, loyalty, and quiet companionship. He'd been there through scraped knees, thunderstorm fears, and lonely nights. He had been Ellie's protector when she was small, always lying beside her bed at night. He had waited for Jamie every afternoon by the gate after school. He knew the sound of Mr. Roberts' car before it even turned onto the street, but today felt different. His food bowls were gone. His bed, with its worn edges and chewed corners, had been thrown into the trash bin 2 days ago. The toys he had, once carried around in his mouth like treasure, had vanished. "Mom, we're not forgetting Rex, right?" Ellie asked, tugging on her mother's shirt. She was 9, old enough to feel worry, but too young to mask it. Her wide eyes looked from her mom to Rex and back again. Mrs. Roberts froze. Her hands tightened around the clipboard she'd been using to check off tasks. "Sweetie," she started, her voice softening. Rex can't come with us." "What?" Ellie's voice cracked. "Our new apartment doesn't allow dogs, especially big ones," her father added from the hallway, his tone gruff, trying to keep it practical. "It's just not possible, honey." "But he's our dog," Ellie cried. "He's family." "I know," Mrs. Roberts said, kneeling down to her daughter. "Believe me, I wish things were different. But we don't have a choice right now. Maybe the new homeowners will love him just as much as we do. He's smart, loyal, he'll be okay." "No, he won't," Ellie whispered. She walked over to Rex, dropped to her knees, and threw her arms around his neck, her face buried in his fur as her small shoulders shook with sobs. Rex licked her cheek, confused but concerned, leaning into her touch like he always did when she cried. "I'm sorry," she whispered over and over. "I'm so sorry." Mr. Roberts cleared his throat. "Ellie, come on, we have to go." Reluctantly, she stood. She turned to Rex one last time. "Don't forget us, okay? Please don't forget me." The front door closed behind them, and moments later the rumble of the car engine filled the air. Rex's ears perked. He sprang to his feet and ran to the edge of the porch. The family car began backing out of the driveway. Behind it, the large moving truck followed, and that's when Rex ran. With all the strength in his legs and urgency in his heart, Rex bolted after them, barking, a sound full of desperation, confusion, and sorrow. His paws pounded the pavement as he chased after the car that carried his world. He didn't understand. All he knew was that they were leaving, and he had to be with them. But the car didn't stop. No one looked back. The brake lights flickered, then disappeared around the corner. The sound of the engine faded, and then it was silent. Rex stood in the middle of the street, panting. His ears flicked forward as if straining to hear something that might prove this was all just a game, that they'd come back, that they hadn't just driven away without him. But the silence answered him. Slowly, he turned and padded back to the house. His house. He climbed up the steps of the front porch, circled once in the same spot he always did when he was nervous, and then lowered himself to the wooden boards. The porch light flicked on as dusk approached, casting a dim glow over the loyal dog. He rested his head on his paws, eyes wide open, ears alert, waiting. That night the house was dark and cold, the windows lifeless. But Rex stayed, sleeping on the porch he'd always guarded, guarding it still, even though there was no one inside to protect, even though no one was coming back. The nights began to feel colder, but Rex remained on the porch. Day after day, night after night, he waited in the exact same spot where he had last seen the Roberts family drive away. Time moved forward, but Rex did not. His body aged with each passing day, but his heart was stuck in that moment when the car turned the corner and disappeared. He barely moved except to drink from a puddle or sniff the air when a car passed by, always lifting his head in cautious hope. Maybe this time, it would be them. Maybe they'd realize they'd forgotten him. Maybe they were just coming back. But each time the sound faded into the distance and the silence settled again like a fog. Neighbors noticed the dog almost immediately. Some pitied him. Some were annoyed. But none approached him closely. The new owners hadn't arrived yet and the house stood empty. The once well-groomed German Shepherd began to look more like a ghost, a haunting reminder of something abandoned and forgotten. His coat, once brushed weekly by little Ellie, grew matted and dusty. His ribs started to show, not from neglect, but from his own refusal to eat anything strangers left behind. Rex would sniff at the food, a sandwich left on a napkin, a bowl of dry kibble set near the gate, but would never touch it. He was waiting for food from a hand he knew. Mrs. Langley, an elderly woman who lived 2 houses down, was the first to approach him with gentle caution. "Oh, sweetheart, they really did leave you, didn't they?" she murmured one morning, her voice trembling as she slowly crept closer with a plate of chicken and rice. Rex stood up, his tail wagging cautiously, but he didn't move forward. He sniffed, then backed away, settling back into his spot. He didn't growl, he didn't bark, he just waited. "Lord help us," Mrs. Langley said under her breath. "What kind of people leave a dog behind?" Over the next few days, she brought him food and water consistently, talking to him softly each time. But even after a week, Rex never followed her home or allowed her to touch him. His devotion was so absolute that he would rather sit in the pouring rain than sleep on a soft bed somewhere else. The weather worsened. Rain fell harder, and the wind whipped cruelly through the neighborhood, rustling dead leaves and making the old porch groan. Still, Rex stayed. He curled up tightly, nose tucked under his tail, his eyes barely closing. On stormy nights, he would occasionally let out a low whimper, not out of fear for himself, but as if calling out to the people who were no longer listening. Some kids walked by one day after school and threw rocks at him, thinking it was funny. One struck him on the side. Rex didn't bark or chase them. He didn't even flinch. He simply lowered his head, closed his eyes, and waited for them to go away, as though he had already endured the worst pain possible, abandonment. Nothing else compared. A few days later, a family came to look at the house. The realtor jingled keys, explaining features as they stepped onto the porch. Rex sat silently in the far corner, his head raised. "Oh, a dog," the potential buyer exclaimed, hesitating. "Is he part of the house too?" They chuckled nervously. "He's been here since the previous owners left," the realtor replied, clearly uncomfortable. "Animal services came by once but couldn't catch him. He's harmless, just loyal." The buyers moved on quickly, and the house remained unsold. Mrs. Langley tried once again to coax Rex with a leash, calling softly, "Rex, sweet boy, come on. You don't have to do this." He looked at her, his eyes filled with silent heartbreak, and then turned his gaze back to the street, his eyes scanning for a car that would never return. Time dragged on. The days got shorter. Leaves turned golden and fell like memories from the trees. Children wore jackets now as they played, but Rex stayed the same, motionless on the porch, still believing, still hoping. Every time a car came up the road, his ears perked, his body lifted, ready to leap with joy. But every time it wasn't them. One evening, Mrs. Langley sat with him at a distance. She didn't bring food that day, just herself and a small blanket she laid across her lap. She told him about her late husband, about the dog they used to have, named Shadow. She told Rex that not all love gets the ending it deserves, that sometimes the people we give everything to don't give anything back. She cried softly, and for the first time Rex inched just slightly toward her. Not enough to touch, but enough to acknowledge her pain. Enough to say, "I know." That night, under a sky scattered with stars, Rex lifted his head one more time as a car passed by. This time his tail wagged just a little before it drooped again. He laid back down with a soft, drawn-out sigh. The moon cast a pale glow on his graying fur and the cold air curled around his body. Still he waited, not because he believed anymore, but because it was all he knew to do. It was a gray November afternoon when something shifted, subtle at first, like the first breeze before a storm. The clouds hung low over the neighborhood, casting long shadows over the abandoned porch where Rex still laid, wrapped in the blanket of his own sorrow. His ribs now showed through his weathered coat and his movements were slow, stiffer with the cold and time. His once bright amber eyes had dulled to the shade of worn copper, still beautiful but clearly weary. That day, a beat-up white van turned into the street and slowed as it neared the Roberts' old house. It wasn't flashy. It didn't sound like the SUV Rex remembered, but still the faithful dog lifted his head, ears twitching, eyes alert. The van stopped. Rex rose to his feet, shaky but ready, hope blooming again like a stubborn weed breaking through concrete. The side door creaked open, and a young woman stepped out, bundled in a thick green coat and scarf, her dark brown hair pulled into a messy bun. She held a clipboard in one hand and a small digital camera in the other. Behind her came an older man with a grizzled beard and a kind expression, carrying a dog crate and a satchel that said, "Hope Hearts Rescue." They were rescuers. The woman glanced toward the porch and froze when she saw Rex, standing so still he could have been mistaken for a statue carved from grief. "There he is," she whispered. "That's the one Mrs. Langley called about." The man followed her gaze. "Damn, he really didn't leave?" "Not once," she replied. 3 months. Rex watched them both closely. He didn't move, but his body was tense, as if poised between fight and flight. The woman slowly approached, crouching down a few feet from the steps. "Hey, buddy," she said softly. "I'm Maya. You've been waiting here a long time, haven't you?" Her voice was calm, like a gentle breeze through pine trees. She didn't reach for him. She just sat there and waited. Rex didn't growl, he didn't bark. He simply observed her, tail slightly lowered, unsure of her intentions. Maya placed a piece of cooked chicken on the step near her and slid it slightly closer to him. "This is for you. You must be hungry." Rex sniffed the air, hesitated, then took a cautious step forward. His paws landed soundlessly on the creaking wood. Another step. Another. He sniffed the chicken, looked at her once more, then, gently, almost shyly, ate the small piece. Maya's heart skipped a beat. "That's a good boy," she whispered. "You're not alone anymore." The man, whose name was Tom, set the crate down quietly near the van. "You think he'll come with us?" Maya looked back at Rex, whose eyes were now locked on hers. There was still sorrow in them, oceans of it. But beneath that sorrow, maybe a flicker of trust. "I think he might," she said. Over the next hour, they sat with him. No leash, no sudden movements, just presence. Maya spoke softly, telling him stories about other dogs they'd saved. Some found in junkyards, some on highways, some beaten, some simply forgotten. Each story seemed to settle Rex's spirit just a little more. Eventually, Maya stood up and slowly walked toward the van. She left the crate door open and placed another piece of chicken inside. Rex followed, tentatively at first, but step by step, he approached the van. He sniffed the crate, looked back at the porch, his porch, the last place he saw his family, and then turned toward the open space ahead. It wasn't easy. Even in his exhausted body, the decision weighed heavily on him. But Maya didn't rush him. She just stood aside, silent, waiting. And finally, Rex stepped inside. The crate door clicked softly shut. Maya exhaled in relief and knelt beside it. "You're safe now, buddy," she whispered. "You don't have to wait anymore." As the van pulled away, the porch faded into the distance in the rearview mirror. Rex watched it through the crate bars. He didn't whine. He didn't cry. But he didn't look away for a long time. It was the end of a chapter. But perhaps it was the beginning of a new one. The shelter was quiet when Rex arrived. A small building on the outskirts of town, surrounded by trees that swayed gently in the wind, as if trying to welcome him with a soft song. The staff at Hope Heart's Rescue were kind, their voices hushed and movements gentle. But Rex still shook when they opened the crate. His body was tired, but his eyes were watchful, scanning every face for the ones that had left him behind. He didn't understand why he was there. He didn't understand why he wasn't on the porch anymore, or why his family had never come back. And because dogs don't ask questions the way people do, all he could do was wait, for a return that might never happen, and for a heart to heal that had shattered into too many pieces. Maya stayed with him. She didn't just drop him off and walk away. She sat in the corner of the room, cross-legged on the tiled floor, whispering to him while he curled in the crate. Her voice was the one thing that kept him grounded, the voice that had spoken to him with kindness when all he had known was silence and wind. For the first few days, Rex barely ate. He would drink when no one watched and nibble on bits of food when the room was empty. His body was frail but still noble, the way a soldier might look after returning from a long war. His coat was matted, and small sores lined his paws from pacing that porch through rain and sun and snow. Maya took things slow. She didn't force him to walk or play. She didn't try to leash him right away. Instead, she read to him. Yes, read. Children's books, magazines, novels, anything with a soothing tone. She brought a blanket from her home and placed it near his bed. At first, Rex ignored it. But slowly, his body began to lean toward the scent of her presence. On the 5th night, he laid his head on the blanket and sighed. It was the first sound of comfort he had made in weeks. Other dogs came and went, happy tails wagging, barking, yipping, being walked out by excited new families. But not Rex. He stayed back, always watching, always quiet. The staff began calling him the gentleman because of the way he carried himself even in sorrow. He didn't growl, he didn't beg, he simply endured. One morning, Maya brought something different. It was an old police K9 badge, dulled with age, hanging from a worn leather collar. She placed it gently next to him. "I found it in your records," she said softly. "You were a service dog once, a protector. You were trained to help, to guard, to love." Rex sniffed the badge. Something deep inside him stirred. A memory, a flicker of pride. No one knew. But his tail thumped the floor once, then again. It was a breakthrough. From that day on, small changes appeared like blossoms after winter. Rex began eating beside Maya instead of waiting for her to leave. He walked outside with her on quiet paths behind the shelter, his steps cautious but curious. He sniffed the air. He looked at birds. He even watched squirrels with a gentle tilt of his head. He still didn't trust strangers, especially men, but he let Maya's co-workers bring him treats and sometimes allowed them to pet him for a second or two before retreating back to his bed. His bed, once a cold corner, was now padded with blankets, toys, and that special badge hanging above. The porch was behind him, but not forgotten. One afternoon, Maya brought a little girl named Sophie. She was 7, with red pigtails and a missing front tooth. She had been adopted herself, and she understood loss in the way children sometimes do more deeply than adults expect. She sat beside Rex and said nothing for 10 minutes. Then she reached into her backpack and pulled out a stuffed animal, a German Shepherd plushie, soft and smiling. "This is Barky," she said. "He's been with me when I was scared." Rex looked at the toy, then at Sophie, then back at the toy. "You can have him if you want," Sophie added. And slowly, Rex moved forward, sniffed Barky, and laid beside him. Maya watched through glass with a hand over her mouth, tears brimming in her eyes. That moment, quiet, gentle, was the first time Rex truly let someone new into his broken heart. The shelter staff knew then Rex was ready. Ready, not just to survive, but maybe to love again. But who would adopt a senior dog, scarred by abandonment, still haunted by the echoes of loyalty unreturned? That answer would come sooner than expected. One rainy Sunday, a man named Daniel visited the shelter. He was tall, quiet, and wore a dark blue jacket with a patch that read, "Retired K9 Handler." He had lost his own partner, Max, to cancer 2 years ago and hadn't opened his heart to another dog since. But when he saw Rex, noble, wounded, waiting, something shifted. He crouched slowly and offered his hand. "I know that look," Daniel said. "I've had it too." Rex sniffed him. Then, in a move that made the entire room hold its breath, Rex placed his paw in Daniel's palm. It was small, but it was enough. Maya, watching from across the room, smiled through her tears. Healing had begun. Not through medicine or training, but through time, patience, and love. And Rex? He was beginning to understand that the porch might be behind him, but his heart still had room for something new, something whole. The rain had stopped by the time Rex stepped out of the shelter with Daniel. Drops still clung to the tips of the tree branches, falling softly like tiny tears on the ground, but the sky was clearing, pale sunlight beginning to peek through the gray clouds. Rex walked beside the retired K9 handler with slow but steady steps, his ears perked, eyes alert, yet gentle. There was a quiet understanding between the two, a connection that didn't need words. They were both survivors, both bearing scars, some visible, some not, but both still willing to try. Daniel's truck was parked just outside the gate. He opened the passenger door and laid a thick blanket on the seat. "It's for you, buddy," he said, patting it. Rex looked up at him, then jumped in with a grace that seemed to surprise them both. He settled into the seat and looked out the window, not with fear this time, but with wonder. The ride home was silent except for the hum of the tires and the soft beat of Rex's breathing. Daniel kept glancing at him, smiling quietly to himself. "You're gonna be all right," he said, almost to himself, as if trying to convince his own heart. "We both are." Home was a modest house on a quiet street with a white picket fence, a front yard, and a big tree that swayed in the breeze. Daniel opened the gate and let Rex roam freely. At first, Rex was cautious. He sniffed every corner, inspected the porch, looked at the garden, and finally stopped by the front door, sitting just like he had at the house that left him. Daniel noticed. He walked over slowly and knelt beside him. "You don't have to wait anymore," he whispered, his voice tight with emotion. "You're not forgotten. You're home." That night, Rex didn't sleep on a porch. He slept inside, on a soft bed Daniel had prepared near the fireplace. The warmth soothed his bones, and the quiet crackle of the flames lulled him into the deepest sleep he'd had in months. Daniel watched him, sitting on the couch with a cup of tea and Max's old collar in his hand. He placed it beside Rex's new bed, not as a replacement but as a symbol. Two warriors now connected through loss and love. The days that followed were filled with discovery. Rex began to rediscover joy. He found delight in the morning walks through the neighborhood, the rustle of squirrels in the bushes, and the giggles of the children down the street who would wave at him from their porches. He didn't bark or chase. He just watched, ears twitching, tail swaying softly behind him. Daniel noticed the change. "See, you're more than what happened to you," he said during one of their walks. "You're who you choose to become now." They trained together, gently. Rex responded to the old commands like he was waking up parts of himself that had long been dormant. Sit, stay, search, protect. He wasn't just a pet. He was a partner. Again. And Daniel treated him that way, respectfully, like an equal. As the bond grew, Daniel started bringing Rex to the local veteran center, where other retired officers, soldiers, and canine handlers gathered. At first, Rex stayed close, unsure of the crowd. But the moment he saw a man with a prosthetic leg pet a Labrador and smile through tears, something clicked. He walked over, gently nudged the man's hand, and laid at his feet. From then on, Rex became something more, something greater. He was not just a dog who had been abandoned. He was a healer now, a companion for others whose hearts had been broken too. Veterans patted his head with trembling hands, whispered old stories into his ears, and found strength in his presence. They didn't need Rex to do tricks or entertain. They just needed him to be there. And he was. Always. Maya came to visit him one weekend. She walked up the porch, Daniel's porch now, and when Rex saw her, his eyes lit up with a softness that melted her heart. He rushed to her and nuzzled into her arms, tail wagging in slow, meaningful waves. Maya laughed and cried at once, stroking his thick fur. "You did it, big guy," she whispered. "You really did it." Daniel invited her in, and the three of them sat around the fireplace, no longer strangers bound by pain, but family woven together by love. Maya looked at the badge still hanging by Rex's new bed next to Max's old collar. She touched it lightly. "He's not waiting anymore," she said. "No," Daniel agreed. "Now he's living." One evening, as golden sunlight bathed the house in amber hues, Rex stood at the open window watching the wind rustle the trees. He didn't flinch at the sound of trucks or the distant echo of a barking dog. He was calm, steady, grounded. The porch of the old house, the one he had waited on night after night, was a memory now. A chapter closed, but he hadn't forgotten. Sometimes he'd sit by the front door, not because he was waiting for someone to return, but because he was guarding something new. A home, a man, a life rebuilt from pieces. And every time Daniel opened the door and said, "Ready for our walk, buddy?" Rex would answer, not with words, but with the silent, sacred loyalty only a dog can give. He no longer looked back. Because he didn't have to. He had been left behind, yes. But now, he had been chosen. And in that choice, his heart healed. Completely. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and leave a comment below. Tell us the name of your city and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from dog lovers all around the world. Don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming stories like this. See you in the next one.